My name is Scott Porter, Superintendent of Schools in AOS 96, 11 towns in the Machias area, and I am offering testimony in opposition to LD798. Senator Millett, Representative Cornfield, and other distinguished members of the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee. Again, my name is Scott Porter, Superintendent of Schools in the Machias area. I'm responsible for 8 schools with a population of 1,000 students. It is my job to ensure that all students in the towns I serve have access to a high-quality education that complies with all state and federal laws. All students, as you know, in Maine currently have the right to come to our public schools to be educated. If this bill becomes law, there will be students, even in my rural part of Maine, that will not be allowed to attend school next year, even though many of them have been attending school with their classmates for many years. This type of law will completely disrupt the education of thousands of students across our state. Families with limited resources that value the education their children are currently receiving will be required to remove their children from public schools and find alternatives for educating them. Many of these parents readily admit they do not have the skills or resources necessary to educate their children apart from the public school system. Who will educate them? These children will be at great risk if LD 798 becomes law. The current immunization law that is in place in our schools is working well. A high percentage of our students are immunized. In our area, it's about 97%, with a small percentage of students opting out due to medical, religious, or philosophical reasons. There are some families that have been able to obtain medical exemptions, but others have sincerely held religious or philosophical beliefs. Currently, the deeply held convictions of these children and their families are being honored by our great state. But LD 798 will change the tolerance that currently exists for differences in our belief systems. Keeping children out of public schools because of deeply held spiritual or philosophical beliefs is just wrong and flies in the face of the liberties our country is known for around the world. This type of law would discriminate against a population of children that deserve to be educated like all the other children in Maine. In closing, I do believe that parents, not the state, know what is best for their children. Parents should have the right to choose whether their children should be immunized or not. In some cases, children have been injured by immunizations, and therefore parents do not feel they can take the risk of injuring their children again. In addition, there are children who have deeply held religious or philosophical beliefs against being vaccinated. We teach our children every day to stand for what they believe. We should give every child that follows their convictions our approval and support, but this type of law would assess them the overwhelming penalty of losing access to an education. LD 798 sends a wrong message to our children and families. I ask this body of important decision makers to not support LD 798. I believe it is wrong for the children of Maine. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Porter, are you a member of the Maine School Superintendents Association?
I am part of that, correct.
And have they voted on this bill?
They have. I'm not representing them at this time. I'm just representing my district.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you happen to know how they voted?
As far as I know, I'm on the legislative committee. The Superintendents Association, it was a difficult conversation.
That's what I just was wondering if you knew how they voted.
Yeah. My understanding, I was in the meeting, was that they support LD 798 with an amendment to keep the religious exemption.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Representative Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nice to see you, Mr. Porter.
See you.
So my question, I know you come before our committee often, and you are a numbers man. If this bill were to pass, how will this financially impact your district if those students can't come to the school?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it has financial implications, there's no question, but, you know, and it would be hard to calculate that without taking a few hours because I have minimum receivers, as you all know what those are, in some of the, with 5 of my 11 towns. Machias would have most of the students that would have this situation at hand. So, I mean, it certainly has financial implications. The bigger piece for me is these kids are not going to have access to a public education. And the thing that really is difficult for me to comprehend is that they won't be allowed to go to school, but yet they can come to after-school activities, and these kids are going to still interact. There is just no way to keep them apart. So how do you do that? Well, logically, I don't think it's possible. So these kids are still going to have time that they're exposed to each other, whether it's with basketball groups that are even outside of school, families. You even have some cases where a child may have been injured by a vaccination, and they have a sibling that was not. So you literally are going to have cases where some of these kids can go to school in the same family, and some that can't. So I can't see logically how it can possibly work when these kids are still going to interact somehow, somewhere, someplace, sometime. And I don't think we're going to be at the place where we have someone watching after-school activities to keep them from coming into those, because I don't think we're even allowed to do that. They can come.
Mr. Porter, we heard testimony earlier, legislator that has been tutoring a child that's forced to stay home because of the compromised immune system. Do you have a sense of how prevalent that is across the state?
I don't.
Okay. That would be a good question to have answered along with the other ones that have been raised earlier. Thank you very much.
Thank you.